Okay, so let's have a closer look at this idea of an energy corridor. Kent Fellows is the energy economist for the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary, and he's joining us today from Calgary. Thanks so much for making the time, Kent.
My pleasure.
So the term energy corridor, I don't know that that's something that everybody necessarily understands the parameters of what that could be, but it was discussed today at the First Minister's meeting in Saskatoon. When you hear that and you hear that that's an idea that they seem all willing to pursue here, what are your initial thoughts?
So I think the second word there is actually a lot more important than the first word, and that is corridor. So we hear a lot of talk about energy corridors. We've also heard talk about economic corridors and trade corridors, but the corridor concept is by far the more important one, and that really speaks to sort of a geographic area where you do what you can to do pre-clearances or otherwise strategize around putting one or more type of transportation infrastructure in that corridor. So whether that's pipelines or electricity transmission lines for energy, or rail, which could haul energy but other goods as well, or a road or a telecommunications line, really anything that's moving people, services, or goods from one part of the economy to the other part of the economy. And so it's really, really productive to hear the federal government and the provincial governments talking about this. It's something that we've done work on for a really, really long time, and the potential benefits are pretty substantial.
So with that in mind, if you look across the country, we heard at that press conference, many ideas about where this might go and what projects might be up for approval. But if you had your pick, where would you suggest an energy corridor makes most sense?
So I think there makes a lot of sense to think about this from two different perspectives, one being internal trade and the other being external trade. So internal trade is moving goods and services around our own economy. So if we're thinking about modes like electricity, there's a lot of benefits to having interprovincial interties that allow us to move electricity east and west across the country. Regions can help each other out during times of blackouts. There are also some economic implications. The cost of generating electricity does change hour to hour, as does the demand. So if you're tying the country closer together on that, east-west makes a lot of sense. On the crude oil side or the oil and gas side, a lot of that conversation goes to international market access, and that's something that Premier Danielle Smith is really, really interested in. That's getting more of our product to Tidewater. There might also be conversations about trying to get Eastern Canada better access to Western Canadian crude, but the economics there are a lot more challenging than they are with the export side of the business.
And so perhaps there's not just one particular area or one corridor, but if a corridor can be identified, as you're saying, it makes sense if it can be one that can accommodate more than just one, one pipeline or rail or, along those lines. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, the benefits are considerably higher if we get out of this thinking about one specific project at a time or one specific mode. And so I know the federal government is talking about fast-tracking private proposals, and I think it's great if we can speed that up while still doing all the work that we need to do. But I would really push the federal government and provincial governments to think about this in terms of what's the next step. So can you do a corridor that has multiple modes in it? Once you sort of break the new ground for, say, a pipeline, how much harder is it to get an electricity transmission line to accompany it? And we should see pretty significant cost savings there. I'd also say I like thinking about this in the plural rather than the singular. So corridors with an S rather than a corridor, because it really is down to what the regional interests are across the country and how different regions can benefit from trading with each other and from trading abroad.
So even if it is, as we heard the Prime Minister say, one project, one review, and as well an approval process, maximum of 2 years, that's the ideal. What's the actual timeline on projects like this look like?
So it does depend on the mode. And right now, what we've seen over the last 10 or 15 years is particular for pipelines, for oil and gas pipelines, those decisions and that analysis has dragged on and on and on. So just last year, about this time last year, we had the Trans Mountain expansion come online. So this was an expansion of an existing pipeline. So we were not looking at a company having to negotiate a new right-of-way for a lot of the process. And that took, that's measured in upwards of a decade or a little bit more since it was first proposed. That timeline dragged pretty significantly, in large part because there were some attempts at shortcuts. There were changes to regulations and legislations that led to delays. So I'm really optimistic about the government's push to try to get these timelines shorter, but I'm cautious that I want to make sure that they're doing that in the right way. It's really important that they make good decisions, that they're not trying to cut out any of the consultation side of things, because we've seen problems with that before, and that can really stymie projects if we're not careful.
That's Ken Fellows, energy economist at the School of Public Policy at University of Calgary, joining us from Calgary. Thanks so much.
Thank you.